Hi, my name is Amara Mbike, and I am a senior in Ezra Stiles College. I am majoring in the history of science, medicine, and public health, and I am also jointly pursuing an MPH at the Yale School of Public Health in Healthcare Management. I'm also originally from Houston, Texas. Additionally, I am also the founder and former co-president of the Yale Nigerian Students Association, as well as a former member and music director of Shades of Yale a cappella. I am pleased to bring you one of our great virtual offerings for the 50th anniversary celebration of the Afro-American Cultural Center at Yale, which we affectionately call the House. The founders of the Afro-American Cultural Center at Yale did more than just build the first Black cultural center on any Ivy League campus. They created a vision for Black life at Yale that endures more than 50 years later. Learn from these pioneers and House leaders to explore how the founders' vision has been realized and what they see as the future of the House and University Black cultural centers. Our session features Ralph Dawson, Yale College class of 71, Shirley L. Daniels, Yale College class of 72, Ruth Chambly, Yale College class of 83, Titilayo Ngwenya, Yale College class of 92, and Casey Gerald, Yale College class of 2009. This session will also be moderated by Muhammad Abdullah, Yale College class of 70. We hope that this session inspires you to strengthen your connection to the House and to each other across our beautifully international community. And we thank you for supporting the House community.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Muhammad Abdullah, and I have the great honor to moderate a fantastic panel that you're going to hear for the next 45 minutes or so. And I want to thank you for tuning in to hear some of the things about the House, which is the name we affectionately give the Afro-American Cultural Center. And we have a very diverse group of people with us. And we're going to go around the table, so to speak, in a moment, and let each of them say who they are and when they were at Yale and anything they might want to add. And then we're going to come back and we're going to have a conversation along the lines of the things that is laid out in the description. So who would like to start? Not everybody at once. Somebody, please. Ralph, how about you?
I guess since I'm the oldest of the panelists, I should go. My name is Ralph Dawson. I'm from Charleston, South Carolina. I was in the Yale class in 1971. During my time at Yale, I served as both whip and moderator of the Black Student Alliance at Yale.
Okay, thank you, Ralph.
Why don't I go next since I'm the next oldest?
Well, I may have you both in being the oldest. I'm class of 70, but thank you. Go ahead.
That's all right. I'm Shirley Daniels, class of 1970. I am from Roxbury, Massachusetts, in Boston, the Hood, by way of North Carolina. And when I was at Yale, I was one of the first women that came into Yale, 40 Black women out of 575. I was at Yale from 1969 to 72 in Yale College. And then from 72 to 74, I was assistant director under W.C. Robinson for the Yale Upward Bound program.
Thank you, Shirley. Who would like to go next? Ruth?
I have to go next since we're going in age order.
Okay, okay.
So I'm Ruth Chambly, and I was in Yale class of 1983. I'm originally from South Bend, Indiana. That's about 2 hours south of Chicago. When I was at Yale, I practically lived at the House, probably like many of us. In addition to being there for every party and event and every party, and then there were parties I went to there as well. I also was involved in BSAY, that's how we said it back in the day. Black Church at Yale, the Yale Gospel Choir, and I'll talk a little bit more later. I'm sure I was a co-founder of HTE, which is the Heritage Theater Ensemble.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very good, very good. And who's next between TT and Casey?
I'll go next.
Okay. Okay.
It's good to be here. My name is TT Ngwenya. And Shirley, I was born in Dorchester, Massachusetts. So I'm originally from Boston. So different neighborhood.
Next door. Yeah.
Next door. It's good to see you here.
Mm-hmm.
I graduated in the class of 1992, and I am one of the founding members of Shades. the vocal group, and we focused upon music of the African diaspora. I also participated in other groups like Black Church of Yale and also the Yale Gospel Choir, which I love so much. I definitely have a special place in my heart for the house. And I was a English major and went to Berkeley College. So.
All right, very good, very good. Casey, you can finish this up.
All right. I am Casey Gerald from Dallas, Texas, Oak Cliff to be specific, and graduate of South Oak Cliff High School, most recent Texas State football champions.
Right. That's big in Texas.
That's big. That's huge. That's huge.
That's huge.
I'm a Yale College class of 2009. I was in Morse. I played on the varsity football team, 2006 Ivy League champions, and co-founded the Black Men's Union with a teammate of mine, Jared Drake, who's from Gary, Indiana, currently at Harvard Law School, and also prominent member of Heritage Theater Ensemble and a whole other group of students who were in organizations that you all founded and led and shaped for us to enjoy and inherit. And so I'm here both with a lot of personal gratitude for your legacies, and also here, I think maybe representing a group of sort of younger alums who simply wouldn't have had the lives or educations that we had without you and so many people who came before us. So I'm really excited to be here.
Well, thank you very much, Casey. It's good to hear everybody's sort of time when we were at Yale and at the house. One of the things that we wanted to sort of look at what the issues were in each of the eras, to see what themes continued, what things maybe were resolved, some of the things that grew. As I think you said, Ruth, you were a founder of the Heritage Theater Ensemble, and then I think I heard you say, TT, that you started Shades, which we heard when we were at the 50th anniversary of BSAY. They were fabulous in their performance, and so you started something that continues to today. Did I hear someone also was very involved with the Black Church at Yale? At that, were you there when was Dwight there doing when you were there?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, very good. Well, I want to say a little bit, and then I want to sort of get to the things. I was, as I said, at Yale from 1966 to 70. And the house, we were in a band, our band, Au Naturel, we used to have our rehearsals in the house. And we were part of the original WYBC Soul Brothers. So FM was not something that existed. I mean, so it just shows dating myself. But when FM came out, New Haven went crazy. When we came on the air playing soul music, and I don't know, Cheryl, if you remember this, and jazz, and then I had a talk show like an NPR show, Community Speaks, and Ralph talks a bit about some of the things going on with the Black Panther trials, and we were involved in that period. I had Hugh Newton in my show, so it was but the house was our home base, and so I can tell you that it made all the difference for us. And so when Casey says that the tradition continues into his group, that's music to our ears. And so let's talk a bit about what were the issues during the time when you were at the house and what kind of things you were doing. Ruth, you're on the screen. Why don't you go ahead and start with you? And what era was that? You said 83?
83, yeah. Issues at the house. I mean, I can say a couple of issues, or an issue at least, that was happening at Yale that became an issue around the house. And that was, we had some issues with the bookstore. One of our Black men students was followed around in the bookstore, and the Yale New Haven police got involved, and Black Student Alliance at Yale ended up organizing some demonstrations and things around that. So that was a big topic my freshman year. And, it's something sadly that could have happened last week and probably has happened over the years since.
Yeah.
So that was just a situation where, we rallied around that student, and BSAY, as I said, supported and led us to lift our voices up kind of in protest of that situation. So that was just one thing. And then just in terms of kind of, my situation at the time, I think as true with anything that was founded, from the house itself to most of the resident organizations that grew out of the house, they all happen because there's some sort of hole that needs to be filled. And in my case, in the fall of 1979, the amazing Angela Bassett produced, directed, and starred in For Colored Girls, which was her senior project in the theater studies major. And I know about that because I went on to be a theater studies major. But needless to say, if you're familiar with that show, it sparked a lot of conversation, some arguments, some other things, but it also made those of us interested in theater realize that the opportunities for people of color to showcase our talents, and particularly to showcase our own stories, were few and far between at Yale. So if we didn't want to spend our whole time there performing, Chekhov or Beckett, not to say there's anything wrong with those things.
Gotcha.
We knew we needed to do something. So that is sort of why the founding of HTE came about. And it was co-founded with Kimbrough Wilkins. And some of the early folks that were in the leadership, Myra Taylor, who's gone on to a career in television and theater. Renee Raymond was there at the very beginning. We worked with the Yale Drama School, some students there. Michael Knight was our advisor and sort of led our workshops. And we actually had Charles S. Dutton.
Lord Richards, the dean at the drama school?
He was.
Okay.
Yes,
okay,
he was the dean at the time. Charles S. Dutton, Rock.
Rock.
Was involved with HCE. He used to come to our meetings and directed many of us in some of our early productions. So yeah, it was a great time. It really took off, and I'm so thrilled to know that it's still going strong.
That's great to hear. Well, I remember that period because I came back to the admissions office then, and I remember that August Wilson was on campus a lot then, and and Dwight was doing all the music for his plays, and so it was a really exciting time. In the house was a place where a lot of that stuff was showcased, not just the Yale rep. So that added to the culture and the richness, not just for the people of color, but for the entire university community. So that was a rich period. Was that also the apartheid divestiture period at all? Was that earlier?
No, not. Let me think. 83. I mean, it was probably of conversation, but I don't remember it being that time. But I did want to mention that Dwight actually wrote and directed, and I'm trying to think if he performed in it. He wrote and directed a show that we produced with HTE called Second Lining.
Okay.
So we had some music in there and all of that. So
very good. Excellent. Going back a bit before your period, Ralph, why don't you talk a bit about some of the things, the climate, what was going on when the house was being born?
Sure, Mohammed. As you know, because you were there and involved in many of the wars and many of the strategy sessions that we were involved in, back in 1967 to 69 was the key operative period for most of these things. And at that time, we had three goals. One was to substantially increase the admission of Black students. There were very few of us there.
Right.
The second thing was to establish a major in Black studies, the first of its kind in the nation, in effect. And that involved a lot of work.
Yeah.
And the third thing was the house itself. Now, because we're talking about the house today, I'm going to skip over those other two.
Okay.
Go back to that if we have time.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the house. The house was a special project for all of us.
That's right.
It was an important situation, and it gave us an opportunity to demonstrate, I think, what we found was necessary to succeed whenever we dealt with the university. We were very disciplined in what we wanted. We focused on those three issues: We did other things, but we focused on those three issues. And one of those issues was the house.
Yeah.
And we knew that we had to make the case.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The university was somewhat hesitant. You got to take yourself back to 1967, and they're bringing some Black folk on the campus. And now these Black folk want to have a Black house. Okay? So that wasn't exactly music to their ears.
Right.
But we had a group of guys with us then, and later women beginning in '69.
Right.
We had a group of guys with us that were very strategic and in what we tried to do. And we worked hard at making the case. We made the university understand, because while they were hesitant, they were good listeners.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If we had to, if you came with a credible case,
Yeah.
Kingman Brewster and Sam Chauncey and guys like that, and Charlie Taylor, who was the provost, they would listen.
Yeah.
So we came with a case. We pointed out to them that you've got a bunch of Black students up here, many of whom are the first in their families to have attended college.
Yep.
Period. And then you add to that, they're in the middle of this distinctive white institution, which was not geared to assimilating them very easily.
Yeah.
So we made the case that there was a need for a bit of a home away from home,
Mm-hmm.
where Black students could get together and come to know each other better.
Mm-hmm.
We were all from all over the country. Some of us were from the South.
Yeah.
Some of us were from the big cities in the North and in the Midwest. And we needed to get to know each other. And we also needed to have things that helped our transition into the Yale environment. The house provided all of those things, in addition to allowing for a bridge between Black Yale and the Black community around Yale.
Exactly.
That surrounded Yale.
Yeah.
So all of these things, like my brother Muhammad talking about the station and things, all of these things helped to knit together what we were trying to build at that time. And the house was a key part of it.
Yeah.
Because you could go there and, like Ruth said, you might spend all your time there, or you might spend a little bit of time there, but it was there for you to be involved, to understand what others were thinking, and to move collectively around a set of projects.
Yeah.
And so it was a beautiful thing. Now, the first house was 1195 Chapel Street.
Chapel Street. That's
around
right.
the corner,
Yeah.
north of York.
Yeah.
The building's still there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we were very proud of that, but we were very fortunate a few years later to get that beautiful building that is sitting behind Ruth right now.
Yeah.
And we sought to make very good use of it.
Yeah.
And we put a lot of programs in there even then, but Ruth has talked about some and others of you have, TT. And so it provides a very strong base that is both a refuge for the students and a beacon for activities Black around the university.
Cheryl, I could tell you were chomping at the bit there, Cheryl. You had something you wanted to add. Please do.
Yeah, I was just agreeing with just about everything that Ralph said, and he hit on a number of points that I also wanted to mention. But primarily the house was a refuge. My focus primarily, I was an Afro-American Studies major, and at that time it was a program, and I was involved to a certain extent with trying with all the brothers who were trying to get it to become a full department. There was a lot of resistance for it becoming a full department. But I had the privilege of working under Roy Bryce Laporte and interning with John Blassingame and, reciting poetry that I had put together in the house, those kinds of things. But what I remember about the first house, 1195, was that it was a house. It was a house. It was in fairly good condition. And we all got together, we Black students got together and we cleaned that thing from top to bottom so that it was habitable and a place that we could get together. And I remember that night after doing all that cleaning, there was a real camaraderie in that space where we just all went around and just shared who we were and talked and did some other things. But I think that set a grounding for the house that we have today.
Yeah.
And then I would just add to what Ralph was saying about some of the programs that bridged us with the New Haven Black community. There were a couple of tutorial programs one was, I think, housed on the old campus, but there was another one, and I can't remember the names. Ralph is better at that than I am.
Is that each one teach one?
No, there were tutoring programs for either junior high and high school Black students.
Okay.
Well, each one teach one might have been one of it.
Yeah.
UIC.
Yeah, but UIC, that's what I'm thinking,
Yeah.
Urban Improvement.
Urban Improvement Corps.
Yeah.
Okay.
But also we had a chance,
And up with
I'm
that.
relying on Ralph here because I'm up here in age. There was a brother from the community who had a Black services organization, and he was constantly at the house. And I know that I was working with him, and I spent one summer under their program in North Carolina, in a small town outside of Rocky Mount, which is where I'm from, helping those people register to vote and finding out exactly what their needs were in a highly segregated society. And those were the kinds of things that bridged us students directly with the community. And I'll say one last thing, and that is I remember G.T. Hottie getting up every single morning for the free breakfast program that the Panthers were hosting. He would get up and get out there and be one of the folks who was handing out free breakfasts to the kids before they went to school. And so the community was seeing that the Yale students, the Yale Black students, weren't just there to be in an elite institution and get that education, but we also cared about the people in the community around us. And not only that, the people who were working at the institution,
Right.
Who were doing all the cooking and the cleaning and the mopping and all of that at the institution.
TT and Casey, we're gonna let you get here in a minute because we want to bring it up a bit. But I think I want to add one thing to give you a historical context for that period. President Johnson had a model cities program, and New Haven was a model city. And the first anti-poverty agency in America was CPI, and that was in New Haven. And so New Haven was in the midst of for the nation of urban renewal and a variety of things. And then when I came to Yale in the fall of 66, there were only 14 Black students at Yale. And our year, 30 of us came, 33 of only 13 graduated 4 years later, which helped make the case that Ralph was talking about as the importance of creating a home base, because most didn't make it, not because they weren't smart enough, but because of the other transitional issues. It was not as a welcoming environment that it became. The house helped make that possible. And if you told somebody in New Haven community you went to Yale, you had a burden of proof with them. They thought you were better than us, huh? So I never told anybody I went to Yale, and by the time they found out it was too late, we were friends. And so we changed that. And in 1983, Bart Giamatti was president of Yale. And that was the weekend that we hosted the Association of Black Admissions Officers in the Ivy League and sister schools. And I was a co-chair that year. We brought everybody there, and he opened his house. And then he came to the house, and he stood up and said that the house was vital to Yale, that it's the crossroads between New Haven and Yale. And so the point being, the house was more than just a place where a bunch of us hung out. It was something that was vital to the whole area. So I don't know, TT and Casey, please take us into your era.
Well, I'll speak a little bit, Mohammed. You asked about divestiture, if that, and that,
Yes.
that whole period of time. And I came a little after the time they had an incident where there's an angry alumnus who set fire to the Winnie Mandela City.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Wooden shanties that were up in front of Woodbridge Hall to protest Yale's continued investment in apartheid in South Africa. And I think one of the reflections, one of the connections we made in terms of music came about when we added Nkosi Sikelele to our repertoire, which is God Bless Africa, which is a South African anthem. So that was one of the major incidents going
Okay.
on at that
Okay.
time.
Very good. And what years was that for you?
So that was 1988. And I will say around that time, the whole idea of diversity and welcoming students of color to the campus was spoken about and acted upon, and thank goodness we weren't the first. And I'm so glad, grateful for the house to have been established, and to folks like Ralph and Shirley and Ruth to have come before and seen the establishment of this institution that was welcoming. I will say around that same time, PROP was created.
Yeah.
And
Pre-registration orientation program.
yes. And it was during that pre-registration orientation that I came, and they had a talent show.
Yeah.
And I felt welcome enough, comfortable enough at the time I was playing saxophone. I played my saxophone.
Okay.
And, and I said, hey, does anybody want to start a band?
Oh my goodness. Okay.
And all of these folks came up to me, all them singers.
All right. Everybody wanted to sing. Okay.
And they're like, let's get together, let's do this. And that was the beginning of Shades.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right.
Wow, you founded something before you even started class.
For the first day of class. My goodness.
Right.
That's beautiful.
Well,
what year was that now, by the way?
That was the summer. That was like a couple of weeks, the summer of 1988.
Okay.
Before I set foot on campus. And so I just took a bunch of names, and there was a lot of energy there, and I really, Shades would not have existed if that orientation program had not happened, really.
Wow. Right.
So those things are so important, in making people feel welcome and empowered. So I just want to say that. So then a couple of weeks in, we started having meetings. We started meeting at first at our, in our dorm rooms, but a lot of us were connected to the house. A lot of us were also in the gospel choir.
Okay.
So we eventually moved our rehearsals to the house.
Okay.
And I will say the Black community, the house community, was definitely, they were one of our biggest fans and critics.
Okay.
Our first couple of concerts, and there were about 7-8 of us. They happened on Black Solidarity Day. They happened on the Kwanzaa celebration at the house.
Okay.
We got a good sense of like where, what were we doing well, what we were not doing well.
They were coming like it is. Okay. All right. Very good. Excellent.
Yes.
Casey, what about you, man? Well, you were after that period, right?
I arrived at Yale in the fall of 2005.
Okay. You came from Texas to Yale.
I came from Texas. I came from Dallas to Yale. I came from Oak Cliff, Texas, and I had never. I remember coach from Yale showed up in my high school one day, who now is the head coach, Tony Reno, who was my position coach.
Okay.
And my high school coach came and he said, "Hey, man, Yale wants you to. Yale is looking at you, and wants you to come on a visit." And I'll never forget being so insulted and really confused. And I said, "Well, Coach, where's Yale?" I mean,
don't feel bad.
No, it just really, it was. I mean, I had a teammate that was number one safety in the nation, played at Oklahoma. We had teammates, you know, I mean, I grew up, there were no white people in my neighborhood. They were all, I mean, everybody was black and we were all poor, you know. So I knew I was going to college. I mean, it wasn't that, but the idea that I would leave Texas and go wherever the heck Connecticut was to play Pee Wee football was just kind of
compared to Texas.
so that I say that not to be funny, but just to give a sense of my perspective of going to Yale. I was possibly one of the most miserable freshmen in the history of Yale College. I mean, I couldn't have been more unhappy, more alone, more angry, honestly. I felt in so many ways, you know, I had never met well-off Black people, honestly. I had never expected white people to treat me well or fairly or anything. I had been raised by incredible Black women in my community, you know, and they said, listen, do whatever you got to do to, you know, deal with white people in whatever way you have to, but just get away from them as quickly as possible. You know, I mean, it was very much ingrained in us that it was dangerous. I mean, they would show us Mississippi Burning in fourth grade.
Oh, wow, my goodness.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So Yale was a very shocking place for me. And
were you isolated by the football team as well? Did you?
No, the football team, and this is where the BMU comes out of.
Okay.
The Black Men's Union was really rare in that it was founded by all athletes, more or less.
Okay.
And when I was on campus, and probably long before and long after, it's gotten worse. I mean, athletes didn't really participate in campus life. But we had this group of guys who, you know, my co-founder, Jared Drake, was from Gary, Indiana.
Okay.
You know, our other co-founder, Rodney Reynolds, a year under us, who, you know, had gone to Rye Country Day, but was from Mount Vernon, and, you know, was with it and had somehow babysat Elizabeth Alexander's kids. I mean, it was sort of weird, you know. It was an interesting cohort of guys who similarly felt isolated in many ways, and also felt that kind of rage, I guess you could say, to be honest with you. And it was an interesting time at Yale, and to be Black and young in America. You know, 2006 was the Gina 6 in Gina, Louisiana. I don't know if y'all remember that, but it was like, you know, every generation of young Black people has a moment where something happens in the country and you say, oh shit, you know, we're really, you know, what the backyard can say, we're really in the thick of it. You know,
right.
What are we going to do about this? What does this mean that these 6 boys in Gina, Louisiana have nooses hung outside of their school and are being charged with attempted murder for a fight after they were discriminated against, and they're our age, and they're about to be killed by the state, and we're trying to get sustainable macaroni and cheese in Berkeley. I mean, it was just sort of like, it was a wake-up call that we've got to be doing something more than what we're doing here. And Ralph said that Yale hadn't been good at assimilating Black people, Black students. I think in some ways, my era sort of represents Yale becoming too good at assimilating Black people. I mean, you know, we had a Black CFO of Yale, we had a Black dean of the college, we had a BMU member who a few years ago became the first Black president of the student body. We had Black astrophysicists, we had Black neurosurgeons, we had Black, the smartest people at the law school were Black, the smartest people at the drama school, I mean, you know, but at the same time, I went back a few years ago to a Black Men's Union induction ceremony, 50 freshmen, and a senior Black administrator got in front of these 18-year-old boys, and his advice to them was, hey, I'm gonna give you advice that I was given when I came to Yale. you may be a token, but just be the best token you can be.
Mm.
Ooh.
Wow.
And so that's a very heartbreaking thing to think about,
Yeah.
because as I'm thinking about this, one of my co-founders of the Black Men's Union committed suicide in 2016.
Wow.
Mm.
My brother that I helped recruit from St. Louis, who had a similar childhood to mine. And so I think in many ways, especially with the biggest event for all of us, 2008, while I was still on campus, we get a Black president. We have this interesting moment where so many of the things that so many of our forebears have fought for and sacrificed for and died for and suffered for and dreamed about are happening. And yet also we're reckoning with the psychic cost of the journeys that we've taken,
Right.
the emotional cost of the journeys that we've taken. And so a lot of, I think, what the Black Men's Union came out of was that kind of dumb feeling that I guess teenagers always have, that adults are lying to you, you know, and that there's something not quite right.
Okay.
And something that you've not been told. And so a lot of what we did early on was try to go back to what you all had done in your eras. I mean, our first meetings were with James Comer, were with,
Yeah, sure.
we would go and read the minutes of Glenn Deshabet, and, you know, we would go and find, remember an alum introduced us to Roosevelt Thompson. I applied for the Rhodes when I was.
Yeah. He was a football player. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, Kurt Schmoke would, you know,
Yeah.
time to have lunch with us.
Yeah.
We went and met with Warren Kimbrough,
Oh, yeah.
who had gone to jail for the murder of Alex Rackley.
He was head of the Black Panther chapter in New Haven. That's
Absolutely.
right.
And so we were very much, and I remember Warren telling us, he said, listen, all this work y'all are doing, all the work we do as Black people has to be about liberation. And we were 20 years old. We had no idea what liberation was, but that was sort of this North Star in many ways. And so I actually see my time at Yale in some ways to be a reckoning in some ways with what is the point of Black people achieving the American dream? I mean, what are we really getting at here? What is the point of us infiltrating morally bankrupt institutions? What is the point of us getting more of us here if we can't keep each other alive? And if we learn how to be great, but what does it mean to learn how to be free? You know? So that was really, for me, as I think about the house, as I think about 50 years, as I think about how the house and what you all built represents models of being, not just at Yale,
Right.
but so much of our work was in concert with Black people at other Ivy League schools and other schools that weren't in the Ivy League.
Right.
And so many of us trying to find ways to fulfill all the hopes and dreams of the people that sent us to these places, but also be free and also not lose our minds and also not just subscribe to a vision of success and accomplishment that corrodes our soul. You know, that was very much, I think, what we were going through. I know that was a long,
But that's good, though. That's good. You raised a lot of powerful points, and I think it's a nice transition into what we need to talk about, which is the future, and what should it look like, and you've already talked about it in ways that gives us a intense sense of what the stakes are. So what are your visions? What are your thoughts about the role of the house as we continue in these areas, all these areas that are complex in many cases that we have to deal with? Can you weigh in on that?
Yeah, I'll tell you.
Go ahead. Why don't you go ahead? Yes, Casey, start us off, please.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. I spent a lot of time on college campuses, and I joined the board of the Football Association. I might have been the only Black person on the board at that time, and I was maybe 30 years younger than the next youngest person. And I went for a meeting on campus the week that a lot of it was the summer or the fall that all the stuff was happening at University of Missouri and colleges across the country, and the students were raging mad. And so many of the adults said, well, these students are out of control. You know, we can't, what's wrong with them, you know? And I was sitting in this board meeting, and I had learned from some Black Men's Union students that Black students at Yale were planning to stage a die-in at the Harvard-Yale game. And I'm sitting in the board meeting before Harvard-Yale with the people who run the Yale Football Association, okay? All class of 50, 60, you know, rich, mostly white men who had no idea about what had been happening on campus. And some of them didn't even know what a die-in was. And it was interesting to me because I had initially tried to talk some of these students down off the ledge because I said, isn't that a bit extreme, don't you think, you know? But then I saw how disconnected and asleep these esteemed alums and leaders were. And I went back to those young people, those students, undergraduates that evening, and I said, give them hell. I think the greatest tradition of the House and of what so many of our forebears did was to make it uncomfortable for people with power to not do something to make things better. And so as much as the current climate, not just at Yale, but at many college campuses, especially before the pandemic, but even during, has been this war between students and administrators around safe spaces and consent and free speech and inclusivity and all of this stuff. And all the adults are telling the students, well, just listen to us, just relax, just calm down. And the more I see the inaction of our campus leaders at Yale and elsewhere, the more I hope that the students at the FM House and other Black students and young people across the country keep giving as much hell as possible and keep holding their leaders and their administrators and their teachers to account. The last thing I'll say, I think of what Kurt Schmoke said for the May Day protest at Yale. He was the only student that spoke. I mean, you all remember this, of course. And Kurt Schmoke told the administration, he said, we are asking you as our leaders to lead us, you know. And so my big hope is that as we look forward, that we see the House not just as an institution for its own self-perpetuation, but to see the House as a maroon colony where young Black people agitate and support one another in their own liberation and in the liberation of Black young people on college campuses all over the world.
Okay, anybody else want to add your vision, your thoughts, what the House role can be in the evolution of the times that we're in?
I'd like to say something, but I didn't know if someone else had something else to say, because I think that all of the speakers have said, have touched on all aspects, all dimension of the issue. When I was in school at Yale, and even when I was a transfer student from Simmons in Boston, and we had the same issue. The hot debate was whether or not we were fighting for integration or assimilation. And in integration, I look at it like America is a stew pot. All the vegetables maintain their integrity in the stew pot, as opposed to a melting pot where all that's put into the melting pot, you lose your integrity, you lose your sense of who you are. I think that that argument continues on in everything that we do, which touches on what Casey is referring to, and some of the other speakers have touched on it as well, in that we're finding ways to be authentic in who we are and what our callings are as a people in a certain environment as a people here at Yale. I would just throw out that there is an integrity piece that must be maintained in everything that you do. And I'm saying this, and y'all can read my bio, what have you, but I'm saying this because that integrity of our faith, of our purpose, of certain moral codes that we hold, come from our slave heritage. There were certain things we had to hold on to in order to give our lives some purpose, to maintain the kind of relationships that were torn asunder by someone being sold out. The person was still your husband. The person was still your child, even though they weren't living with you anymore. I think sometimes what I hear from people who are successful in white America, they are still saying there's racism. We're running into it everywhere that we go, and we're fighting whichever way that we can, or we're dealing with it or not dealing with it, whichever way we can. Race in this country has not gone away, and still has to be part of the formula that whatever it is and whatever path you choose to take, it's still got to be a part of that formula, along with maintaining integrity that I think the House can provide. In its title is Cultural Center. How do we maintain or reserve and preserve our culture in that place? And you're seeing some of it with some of the groups that these folks have set up and were put into place. And I'll just say this last thing, by the way, that pre-registration program, that came out of a BSAY committee. I was head of the admissions tutorial transition financial aid committee. And we had a summer program for fresh people who were coming in before they started school. So it's transitioned, I'm glad to say, into something, you called it PROP.
Mhm.
Seems to be much more formal.
It
So
actually was there when I was at Yale. So
Yeah.
I don't know when it was founded, but it was at least in place in 1979.
Yeah, it was in place before I came in 69. I was just charged with perpetuating it and getting it started and getting money from Yale to make sure that it could be in place when fresh people came into Yale, if I may be so PC.
Mm. Well, I can say a little bit about the prompt. Go ahead, Ralph, go ahead.
If I could comment on where I think we are. I think we're in a situation where the House and its future is very similar in a way to its past. It has to serve the Black students and the Black community in the best ways that it can. We are facing some of the same issues that we faced in the 1950s and 60s with some more subtle aggressors, some not as aggressive, but the question becomes, what do each of us do and contribute? And the House is an incubator, from my perspective, for allowing people to pursue the things that they think can help our community, can help the university, can help the Black students. It's a large vessel. It has lots of potential opportunities and programs, things that already exist and things that may come. But the key to it all is for each of us in that environment to try to do the best we can to improve things.
Mhm.
And I think the House provides a framework for doing that. Each of us has an obligation, as Obama says, to run your own lap. The struggle continues. The struggle is not over, and it ain't gonna be, it wasn't, yes, Casey, we all thought for a half a minute that the struggle might have been over on November 4th of 2008. But, you know, the empire strikes back.
Mhm.
And
There you go.
we saw where we were in 2016. So the struggle continues. What you have to do is to do your best to move us collectively forward. And I think that the House is a place where Black students can get to know themselves better, to know what interests them, and to know how they can help and also interact with the New Haven community. So in that sense, the House continues to play the role that it's always played, just on a slightly different terrain, but it's an absolutely necessary role. And although it hasn't come up in the context of this conversation, I'm going to say this because, Mohammed, you know I like to attack the elephants in the room.
There you go.
Okay. There's a lot of talk around about whether we might better be served with more of a multicultural
Mm.
alternative than the House. And as our brother Martin used to say, multiculturalism has its place, okay? But
Mhm.
it should not be a substitute
Hello.
for a space dedicated to the interests of primarily Black folk who have suffered from systematic discrimination and suppression,
Mhm.
and who face it in many ways even today. So the House is as necessary today as it was, Muhammad, when you and Glenn and Woody and Paul, and you know I could call 15 other names, when we all
Absolutely, that's
sat
right.
down
Right, that's
and
right.
we said, this has to happen,
Yeah.
okay? And so the charge to the students of today is the same charge. Be disciplined, figure out what you want, and learn how to make your case and defend your case. And we'll continue to have the institution that we've had.
So
Well,
let me bring up
Please,
another
go ahead, please, go ahead.
another potential elephant, and that is, you know, I had heard that the House went through a period of time, I don't know exactly when, where it wasn't being used quite as much as it had in my day. You know, the students weren't coming around as much. Maybe the programs weren't as robustly being supported, and which was troublesome to me. And I guess what I would say is that, you know, to nurture the students that are there requires that the students avail themselves, I guess, of what the House has to offer. And if there was a time when the House was not fulfilling that need for students, you know, that perhaps more founding needed to happen. There needed to be new organizations, a new influx of ideas for what those students needed at that time. I agree with you. The House itself and everything it represents and everything that it offers is crucial. And maybe all the students didn't realize that at the time, and that they needed to sort of think about what needs are not being met. And if they're not being met, how can I sort of bring those to the fore? So my hope for the House is that it will always be that beacon for students past, present, and future. And that if it needs to change, if it needs to evolve, if new organizations need to be founded, that the students will go on ahead and do that so that it can continue to thrive.
We're running out of time, unfortunately. I got the note from Wendy. We're coming up on the end. Titi, you haven't had a chance to speak, please.
I just want to quickly piggyback on and Ruth's idea of incubator, the house being an incubator of sorts. And I just want to say, I think the future of the house is to remain that that home and that springboard that allowed us to interrupt and interrogate the structures that existed. You know, why do we need another a cappella group? We need a vocal group that does Black music. That doesn't exist. We want it. It's our music. We want it. You know, we wouldn't have been able to assert ourselves that way if we hadn't had that support and the home and the incubator and that space to strategize and practice and build our spirits up. So I hope that the house remains that place that creates that kind of empowerment and helps people assert their humanity in that way.
Very good. Why don't we go around one more time and give everybody an opportunity to share anything else you'd like to say, and we have about a minute or two to do that in. So that way everybody gets a chance. So we'll come back to you, TT, since you just got you catch your breath. All right, and let's Shirley, why don't you get us started?
Well, I really don't know what else to say. I think that what's been said has been well said. They're all different pieces of the same part. The house is, I agree with Ralph, it is an incubator. And I agree with Ruth that it is a place where needs are rebirthed and birthed so that we can go forward. And I agree with TT, it is a springboard. And I also agree with Casey that it's a place where you can question why you're here and what your purposes are, in this world as you figure it out. And I'm hoping that the organization that you have, Casey, which I assume is based in the house, is having those kinds of important conversations among themselves. And as you said, you went back to the past to find the foundation again on why the house is important. As an alum, my problem has been, I come back for the anniversary, the Yale anniversary, the Yale reunions and the anniversry. And when I come there, nobody wants to talk to me. I guess it's my gray hair, but nobody wants to say hello. Nobody wants to, they have some kind of little sipping tips and that kind of thing, but nobody wants to sit down and talk to me. So if the house can also provide for alumni a little bit better, I'd appreciate it.
Okay.
I'll just end there.
All right, Casey?
Yeah, that's a great, Shirley's point is so important about, I won't put it on the house. I won't put the responsibility of that work on the house. My charge is to Black Yale students at this very serious time in the world. One of the great things about growing up as I did, where all of us were Black, was that you never expected for a group of Black people to agree about anything. Like that was never the goal. You expected that you could love one another and be in really, really intense explorations, okay? And as we were founding the Black Men's Union, one of the people I talked to most was my godmother, who was a 40-year public school teacher in Dallas, Texas, who was at Southern University in 1968, 69, 70. And the same thing that she and her friends were fighting about in Baton Rouge in 1968 and 69 and 70 were the same things that we were trying to figure out in New Haven in 2006, 2007, 2008. And that wasn't to say, oh, be depressed, we're still fighting the same things. It was to say, there is no way we can solve the challenges and answer the questions of our time without deep engagement with people who have come before us, who have tried to answer these questions, who have written about these questions. So my charge always is, whenever I go back to the Black Men's Union and talk to other students, it is, first of all, you have to do your work. You can't mail in the intellectual labor that goes into the liberation of Black people. You can't do that. You actually have to show up and do the reading. You have to go out and talk to the people. You have to, so that's one charge. And the other charge is sort of to what Ralph was saying. I have been very clear to the future leadership of the Black Men's Union that it is your job to interrogate actively whether we're even necessary anymore. And if you come to me and you say, we've spent a few years and we've done the reading and we've had the conversations and we don't think organizations devoted solely to men make sense, and now that we know more things about gender, or we think that, if you come back and you make a case to me that you have thoroughly interrogated something that I believed in and come to a different conclusion, you are free to do that. And so I think I would hope that our North Star is not the perpetuation of organizations for the sake of organizations, but that our North Star is the liberation of us as Black people individually and collectively, and to be engaged in the intellectual and spiritual and emotional and collective work to find perhaps new answers to the same questions that Black people have been asking for at least 400 years. Okay, and having some humility with that would be my hope.
Thank you, Casey. We actually have about 5 minutes. TT?
Go back to me so soon? Okay, sure.
I just want to make sure, and then we're going to have Ralph and Ruth, and then I'm going to just sum up and we'll be done. So in light of the time, try to do it if you could within the time limit in mind. Thank you.
Definitely. I will say I sympathize, I empathize, Shirley, with your experience of coming back to the house. One of the, where no one's talking to each other. I've also had the privilege of being connected through Shade to some of the younger classes and having some conversations with younger people, and learning from them and being awakened to the changing conversation. Casey, you talk about like doing the intellectual work. It is so important. Back in my day, it was people of color, it was color blindness, nowadays and diversity. And nowadays we're talking about equity, we're talking about Black and brown people, we're talking about gender. The conversations have evolved and changed and become more focused and specific, but they still address it, at the heart of it, there's systemic racism. And we have to really kind of talk the same language and talk to each other. So across the generations. So that's what I hope to see at the house. And, I don't think it's the house's responsibility. I think it's, the Black alums that need to come together and do that. And that's all I'll add for right now.
Well, that's a lot. Thank you, Titi. That's great. I think you haven't had a chance to speak yet. If you would, go ahead and finish up if you would, Ruth. I know you started talking a bit about the things that starting the right kinds of organizations. Did you have anything else you'd like to finish up with before we go?
I just wanted to say that, the house is obviously not a building.
Correct.
The house is not, a collection of organizations. It is, it is the students and the students that are there at the time that make the house what it is. So times have changed, as you said, TT and Casey, and it is basically up to the students to make the house what they need it to be, to nurture them, to give them an opportunity to make their voice heard, whatever it is that they need to be able to survive and thrive in the midst of this university. So it really is an evolving place, and it has to evolve in order to continue to live and to be what it is to future generations of students at Yale. So I just, I think that I encourage certainly any changes, any new organizations, those things you mentioned, Casey. If an organization no longer serves the needs, let it evolve.
Yeah.
So long live the house.
All right, thank you. Ralph?
Sorry, I was on mute there. I endorse a lot of what the others say. I think for me, the key is, though, the house is a potential space. It can be used in a lot of positive ways. It has been used in a lot of positive ways. It may vary from time to time, depending on the leadership, depending on the focus of Black students at the time, but it's there to be utilized. And I think if we go back to the concept, really, that it is a potential crossroads for the Black students, for the Black community, and now that there is so many more of us, the Black alumni as well.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things can come together around and through the house to help produce a better experience, primarily for the Black students who are there, but also for Yale in general and the larger Black Yale in general. I think that the university benefits as a university from having an Afrocentric space that contributes to the overall university. And I expect that that can continue. And I, for one, as an alumnus, am hoping that through things like the Ogilvy Robinson Dishabille Leadership Forum and other avenues, we're going to impact more the offerings available to the students and how we can build a stronger Black alumni network out of all of this. Because in a very real sense, I see all of us as foot soldiers in a war where we can make a difference if we go out and we do more in our communities and elsewhere. And our Yale connection can help us with all of that. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Well, I want to thank all of you. I think, wow, we've had some fabulous points made and passionately made as well. And so I want to thank you, Ruth and Shirley and TT and Ralph, of course, and Casey for your thoughts and insights. And the fact that we're talking to each other, I think we've all learned something, which is part of the benefit of the house. One of the things you said, Casey, is that you probably didn't know that Glenn played on the basketball team. So we had a lot of athletes who were involved. And
Casey,
yeah,
Glenn also played in a band he failed to mention called The Visitation, which also existed at that time.
yeah. And so the advocacy was going on. I thought I was going to get pulled off the air for a commentary I did about Judge Mulvey, who was over the Black Panther trial. So there's just, we don't know these things because we haven't talked to each other. And it's our responsibility to share it, as well as yours to be open to it. And what I get from this conversation, which is so encouraging, is that you are. And that while some of the things that you say you've experienced in 2006, Texas Southern, who had great track, experienced it in 2067, 68. And Bob Giegengat, who was a Yale track coach, was also the Olympic coach. And Wendell Motley, who came out in that period, was Olympic champion 400. So there's a lot of athletic history at Yale. There was also advocacy. But I want to say this, that I'm just so glad that we had a chance to do this. And this is a conversation that will go on. And I hope it lights a fire and that others will take it up. And I hope that something we've said has been of value to those who will see it, whether it's in the next couple of weeks when it's aired or 10 years from now, that the story is not lost, And then I know if there's anything you want to add later or documents, just let me know. I think that's be valuable to preserve the history. And I want to thank Wendy. Wendy, I know you're invisible on the screen, but you're not invisible in terms of the contribution that you've made. And we thank you for facilitating this. And I want to thank the Afro-American Cultural Center for giving me an opportunity to be your moderator. And I thank you all for your contribution. And with that, I'd like to say, have a great day wherever you are. Stay healthy and stay encouraged, because we ain't done yet. There ain't no stopping us now. We're still moving on up, right? Okay. Thank you all. Okay.
Well,
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.